She blamed her landlord for knocking out her teeth after allegedly tripping over clutter in the dark. But when Judge Judy saw the evidence, and a shocking video recorded hours later, her entire story started falling apart. What happened next left the courtroom stunned. This courtroom case begins with a bizarre dispute over a tenant's missing teeth, a cluttered property, and one very questionable night. The plaintiff, Miss Merritt, tells Judge Judy that she had been renting a room from the defendant, Miss Szymanski, for several months. According to Merritt, the house gradually became overwhelmed with furniture, boxes, tables, chairs, household items, and all kinds of random junk. She says the clutter wasn't limited to the inside of the home either. The front entrance and surrounding outdoor areas were allegedly packed with so much stuff that simply getting to the front door became a challenge. And then, one night, Merritt says that clutter became a serious problem. Merritt explains that she originally moved into the property in March of 2014. She had a 6-month lease, and after that arrangement ended, she continued living there on a month-to-month basis. But eventually, according to her testimony, the situation inside the house became increasingly chaotic. She says police were frequently coming to the property because of conflicts involving the defendant's family, and she claims the constant arguments and disturbances made the home difficult to live in. Then came the incident that ultimately led her to court. Merritt says that on the night in question, she went out to dinner and returned home sometime around 11:30 p.m. or midnight. She insists that she was not intoxicated when she arrived. The problem, she says, was that getting from her car to the front door was not as simple as it should have been. Both vehicles were parked in the driveways, forcing her to use a narrow side area to reach the entrance. From there, she claims, she had to maneuver around tables, chairs, dressers, boxes, and other objects that had been left outside. According to Merritt, the area was especially difficult to navigate because the outdoor lights were not being used.
And this is where the case gets interesting. In premises liability claims, proving that an injury happened isn't necessarily enough. The injured person generally needs evidence connecting the dangerous condition to the accident. And that's exactly where Miss Merritt's case starts running into trouble.
She says she had repeatedly asked for the lights to be turned on at night, but nothing changed. Because the entrance was dark and cluttered, she says she had to rely on the flashlight on her cell phone while trying to make her way inside. She claims the phone light was not powerful enough to properly illuminate all the objects around her, and while attempting to get through the crowded entrance, she suddenly caught her foot on something and went straight down. Merritt describes the fall as severe. She says she landed face first and suffered major damage to her teeth, in her telling. It wasn't just one tooth that was affected. She claims several of her teeth were broken or knocked out, leaving her in tremendous pain. She believes the defendant should be held responsible because, in her view, the dangerous condition of the property created the circumstances that caused the accident. But the defendant has a completely different explanation. Miss Szymanski denies responsibility and questions whether Merritt even knows exactly what caused her fall. She argues that Merritt had been drinking and suggests that alcohol, rather than the clutter around the property, may have contributed to the accident. She also points out that there is no clear proof showing exactly what Merritt tripped over. In other words, the defendant's position is simple. She cannot be blamed for an object when nobody can establish what that object actually was. Judge Judy examines the photographs Merritt brought to court, apparently expecting to see an obvious hazard. But the images do not immediately convince her. Judge Judy looks at the entrance and says that, based on what she can see, the area does not appear nearly as dangerous as Merritt is describing. Merritt insists that the photographs do not tell the whole story. She points out that there were multiple glass tables, dressers, chairs, boxes, and other belongings around the property, especially in the areas people had to pass through to reach the entrance. Merritt tries to explain that the cars blocked the normal path, meaning she couldn't simply walk directly from the driveway to the front door. Instead, she had to squeeze around the side and navigate through the clutter. Judge Judy, however, immediately notices one important detail. Merritt had already been living there for months. She knew what the property looked like, she knew where the objects were, and she knew the outdoor lighting was unreliable. In Judge Judy's view, this matters because Merritt was not encountering an unfamiliar environment for the first time. The judge then makes a practical observation. If she knew the area was dark every night, she could have taken precautions herself. Merritt admits that she normally used the flashlight on her phone when walking outside. Judge Judy questions why she didn't simply use that flashlight on the night she fell. Merritt responds that she did have the phone light on, but she claims it wasn't bright enough to reveal everything in her path. Judge Judy pushes back, essentially telling her that the purpose of a flashlight is to point it directly where you are walking so you can see what is ahead. The conversation takes another strange turn when the defendant brings up what happened several hours after the alleged fall. According to the defendant, Merritt was awake around 5 o'clock in the morning and was behaving extremely strangely. She claims Merritt had no clear idea what had happened to her teeth and was acting confused and disoriented. The defendant says she decided to record the incident because Merritt appeared to be in such a bizarre state that she feared Merritt would later forget what had happened. Judge Judy becomes interested when she learns that the defendant has an actual video of the incident. The courtroom watches as Merritt, still apparently confused and distressed, repeatedly complains that one of her front teeth is missing. She speaks in an unclear manner, appears to be in pain, and keeps trying to figure out what happened. At one point, she seems focused almost entirely on finding someone who can help her and repeatedly talks about contacting her mother. The footage becomes important because it gives the judge another perspective on Merritt's condition several hours after the alleged accident. Rather than showing a straightforward account of someone who clearly remembers tripping over a specific object, the video appears to show someone who is confused about what happened and struggling to communicate. Merritt insists that nobody knocked her teeth out, but the defendant maintains that the video raises serious questions about Merritt's version of events. The defendant also mentions that there were cameras outside the house, suggesting that there might have been additional evidence showing what happened. Merritt, however, maintains that she simply fell and that the clutter and lack of lighting were responsible. The argument becomes increasingly chaotic as both sides try to speak at once, forcing Judge Judy to repeatedly shut down the interruptions and demand that they let her control the questioning. Then comes another critical detail. Merritt admits that she started drinking vodka after waking up in the early morning hours. She explains that she was in pain, her mouth was badly injured, and she was extremely upset about what had happened. But that admission creates an obvious problem for her case. Even though she insists she was sober when she arrived home around midnight, the judge now has to consider the fact that alcohol was involved later in the night, especially when combined with the confusing video footage and Merritt's uncertainty about exactly how the injury occurred. Judge Judy makes it clear that this was not a harmless detail. If Merritt wanted the defendant to be legally responsible for her injuries, she needed to provide convincing evidence connecting the defendant's actions or negligence directly to the accident. Simply showing photographs of clutter was not enough. She also needed to establish exactly what she tripped over and demonstrate that the defendant was responsible for creating a dangerous condition that caused the fall. Instead, the case leaves the judge with too many unanswered questions. Merritt knows she fell. She knows she injured her teeth, but according to the evidence presented, she cannot definitively identify the object that caused her to fall. The photographs do not appear to show an obvious hazard, and her own testimony confirms that she was familiar with the property and already knew that the entrance could be dark at night. Then there is the video from several hours later, which raises even more doubts about how clearly she remembered the incident. After hearing both sides, Judge Judy reaches her conclusion. She does not believe Merritt has provided enough evidence to hold the defendant responsible for the dental injuries. The judge points out the problems with Merritt's argument and makes it clear that a claim cannot be won simply because someone was injured. There has to be evidence showing that the other person was legally responsible for causing that injury. In the end, Judge Judy dismisses Merritt's case. Despite the plaintiff's claim that the cluttered property and poor lighting caused her to fall and damage her teeth, the evidence presented in court fails to establish responsibility. The combination of the unclear circumstances, the photographs, the questions surrounding the alleged obstacle, and the later video leaves too much doubt for the judge to rule in Merritt's favor. What started as a complaint about a dangerous and cluttered rental property ultimately ends with one simple decision from Judge Judy: the case is